All right. So my name is Mary Ellen Defrias. I'm currently serve as the administrator for the Greater Attleboro Taunton Regional Transit Authority. I'm also an adjunct faculty for Bristol Community College, and I do a lot of grant writing and project management. So if we could just quickly, and I'll go down the screen the way I have you, just give me your name, the organization, if you have one, or if you're just here as an individual, and kind of what you're looking for, why you're here for tonight's class. I'm going to start with Martine.
Hi, I'm Martine. I'm with FRACC. My daughter's an artist, and I'm here to learn more.
Okay, excellent. So then would Samantha be your daughter?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll call it Samantha next.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Samantha, and my organization is FRACC. I'm an artist, and I'm also here just to learn a little bit more.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Do you prefer Jay or Jessica?
You can call me Jay.
Okay, perfect.
So hi everyone, my name is Jay. I actually work for Mass Cultural Council. It's a grant funding source throughout the entire state of Mass. Same thing, I'm just here to learn more. I would like to gather some information for our grantees so that I can pass on some useful resources for when they're planning their own projects, as well as curating my own craft in the future.
All right, excellent. Next we'll go to Andy.
Hi, I'm Andy Anello. I'm an artist, and my main project I've been working on for the past 5 or so years is this thing called New Moon Dance Party, which is a series of inclusive dance parties based out of New Bedford, Massachusetts. And I'm here to kind of get ideas about how to better manage that project.
Excellent, and I have to say I love your background. Okay, Tao, do you have audio this week? She couldn't talk. All right. We've had a couple of other people jump in, so Kareem. We're just doing introductions. If you want to just give your name, organization, and why you're here.
Okay, so yes, my name is Kareem Amato, and I have actually 2 businesses. I have a sole proprietorship, Positive Pathways Media, which is I have my own podcast. I also have another business called Rhythm Addict TV. We've been in business since 2012. Officially been in business since 2021 legally. And we are building, we're building our resources. Basically, we're starting off as a media company providing photography, videography to dancers. We film dance competitions. We do interviews with top choreographers in the dance industry, and we're expanding onto TV. So I'm just looking to gain some more knowledge and to brush up on my leadership skills.
All right, excellent. Thank you. And last is Iva.
Hi, it's actually Eva. My name is Eva Brito. It's okay. And I also have multiple business ventures. One I started in 2014, Blessed Arts, which is really now growing more to doing retreats of different sorts and providing healing arts experiences for individuals or organizations. And also recently started a consulting. So this would help also with some of the work and some projects I'm doing with consulting. So glad to be here and to learn more.
All right, excellent. Thank you. And it's a small enough group that as we go through, feel free to jump in with questions. I don't think it's a small enough group that it won't be disruptive, and I don't want to make people wait till the end, but if you're shy, we will have time at the end to answer any questions that come up as well. So let's start at the very beginning. Tonight's plan is we'll go over what is project management, 5 ways that project management helps. We'll look at some steps to create project management plans. We'll learn kind of a little bit of what goes into those plans, project management process, and then we'll save some time for questions at the end. So let's start with the big one. What is project management? Right? It's one of those terms we all use, probably a lot more than we realize, but do we actually understand what it is? So it's tasks that go into organizing a team to accomplish specific objectives or a series of objectives by a specific deadline. Even if you don't have a deadline, you should always give yourself a deadline, because people work better when they know something is due. Even to yourself, you owe that to yourself to set yourself some deadlines. Okay? It will help you manage numerous obstacles that come up, identify the resources you need, forces you to think about milestones and deliverables, identify who is responsible for what, and address all the other aspects of a project. So, and in a small business, you may have less complexity because you're handling maybe not as complex of problems, but you also may have fewer additional resources. And specifically here, the resources we need are people, right? You probably don't have a huge staff. So you may find yourself assigning yourself some of these details. The majority of projects that fail due to a lack of alignment between the business and the project objectives, okay? You want to make sure that if you're doing a project for yourself, that it's working towards your goal. And if it's a project for a client that you have, you want to make sure that the work that they're doing is, or the work that you're doing is accomplishing what the client needs as well. Okay, let me just add person who just came in. Jocelyn. So 5 ways that project management can help your small business. Okay, it'll help you to stay on budget and schedule. If you have a plan for what you're going to do, then you stay focused on both the financial side of it, but also the timing side of it. It gives you a sense of control, which increases your chances of success. It also establishes accountability, both for yourself and for your team. And it gives you actionable insights, okay? We're very good a lot of times at saying, I need to get this done, but we don't know how to get this done. We have an idea, but a project management plan will help you lay out the steps that you need, when you need to do them, in what order. So the first one is to stay on budget and schedule, right? Right from the very outset of any project, you should have a sense of what the cost is going to be and when you need to have it completed. When I talk about a schedule, I like to start with when I want to have it done or when it has to be done, bump it up a week, and then build from that week earlier, build backwards until you have accounted for everything that needs to get done. But I always like to start out by bumping it up a week so that you have some grace period built in there. The other thing is, you know yourselves and you know your team. Do things take longer than they think they're going to take? I have some staff that I just know wait till they get closer to the deadline. So for my own sanity, I move the deadline up, and therefore they have that deadline that they can work towards, and I still have enough time to process everything that I need. So an example that I have here is, you realize equipment rental costs for new homes are increasing over time, and you're building out your bid for a job, so he has to find savings in other areas so that he doesn't have a budget overrun. Okay, because if you have $300,000 to finish a project and your equipment rental costs go up by 20%, somewhere that 20% has to be found. Or you have to go to the client and say, I need to increase the budget by 20%. That may or may not work based on what the project is and the client. All right, control. Without control, you're tying up organizational resources that may not be focused on what you need to have get done. If people are floundering, it could interfere with other tasks that they need, because then everything becomes a fire drill, right? I need to pull everybody off to finish this because we lost track of the fact that this is due now. And if people are tied up on projects, they're not available to help with other projects. So you want to make sure that if you hit any kind of snag, that you have, understand if you have workers available to help you fill in those gaps. And control helps you avoid the disruptions, right? If every time you turn around, you're putting out a fire, you're probably not doing whatever your role is in the project because you're spending so much time putting out the fires. And so then your work's not getting done. If you have a thorough plan, you'll figure out that maybe an extra staff member is available for a particular busy week of the project, and you can ask them to step in just for that week. They may not be on the project team, but you know, this week, we have installation happening for an upgrade that we're putting on our buses. And so work can only be done at night. And I needed a staff member who could come in for that 1 week that they had to be here late at night and cover to be the staff person on property. So I had to find somebody who's available that week, okay? That person may not be involved in the project. They may just be coming in and filling out for that control. Now, project management plan greatly increases your chances of success because you have thought through everything, right? And the difference between project failure and success often comes down to who's managing the project. Spending time at the beginning to come up with a thorough plan helps success at the end. You know, failure to plan on your part does not constitute an emergency on my part. If you don't have a good plan and you come to me at the end and go, oh my God, this is due tomorrow and we don't have everything done, you've now caused an emergency on my end that didn't have to happen had we planned out what needed to get done. So if you need to take an extra day and make sure that the plan has all the details in it or have somebody extra review it, that's all worth it at the beginning so that you don't turn into a rush at the end. So you want to monitor the project and make sure that it's hitting those milestones. Maybe do a weekly check-in and see where you are. And it's hard because for those of you who are very small businesses, maybe it's only yourself and one other person, it's hard to put the time into planning because it's not directly doing work. But the time spent doing the planning will help you achieve your objectives in the end. So the example I pulled here is that during regular check-in calls, she found one of her teams failed to call as many people as she expected. So they were supposed to call 100 people a day and they weren't making those goals. what she found was that people were getting pulled out of her work onto another project because they were short-staffed. But when you do that, you've now hurt Mary's chances of her team doing everything on time. So actions have consequences, and when you have to move people off to help fill in to get a project to the finish line, you're potentially hurting another project, okay? So it's a very big balancing act that we have going on here. So the plan should also help establish accountability. What is your role on the project? What are you responsible for? When do you have to have it done? Okay. You don't want to leave anything vague. This is not a place where you leave ambiguity. Crystal clear on who's doing what when. Okay. Leave nothing to chance. If they know they're responsible, then they can be held accountable. Okay. And that's your big key to making this work. They have to know they're responsible so you can hold them accountable. And actionable insights. So documentation is key. But then when you finish a project, what did you learn from it? Okay. What worked, what didn't work? Did you give yourself enough time? Did you accidentally create that fire drill because you thought this should all get done over a 6-week period and it actually probably should have taken 7 weeks, but you didn't realize that, you know, step 2 was going to take so much longer. This, by going back as you finish a project and make notes on like a debrief on what worked and what didn't work, that will help you in the future to better plan for these projects. And the first couple of times you do this, you're going to guess off, right? I mean, if we've never done something, it's hard to really know how long it will take. But the more times you go through it and you run through similar situations, because not everything may be the same, you'll get a feel for, okay, they can do this amount of work in a week. They can get this done. We have to wait for outside people, so that's going to throw us off. So taking that time to debrief at the end of the project helps you on future projects. Now, there's some misconceptions that project management is only needed for big business, right? You only need it if you're a corporation. It doesn't matter how big or small your business is. Project management is a tool that helps you work smartly and efficiently, okay? Work smarter, not harder. Use your resources to their utmost capacity without burning them out. And a good project management plan can help you achieve your organizational goals within budget and with fewer resources than large companies, right? Because if you have a good plan and you know what you have to do, there's very little room for waste. Any questions on that first part before we move on to the steps? And I can't see all of you because we were a little too big. So if somebody has a question, just shout out, or I'm going to keep going through. All right. So we're going to go through some steps that you can use to create a project management plan. The first thing is to define the goal and the scope, right? So what are you trying to achieve with this project? And make sure that that project goal and project scope is very clear. And you can have a broad goal to achieve by the project completion, but you want to keep the scope then as narrow and focused as possible. What you don't want to do is have the trap of one goal leading to another goal, leading to another goal. You need to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, okay? You need to achieve the current goal and wrap that up with a nice bow, finish that project, and then move on. your team needs to buy into this and to understand it. So anything you're doing with defining the project goal and scope, make sure your team understands, all right? Because unless you're doing this all yourself, you need them to be as invested in this as you are. And that investment in this project is their motivation to contribute their best. Okay. We can't really afford inefficiencies, especially in a small business. You don't have time to do things twice, you don't have time to waste time, and you don't have extra staff a lot of times. So you want to make sure you have a detailed understanding of every aspect of the project, the current status and the time of the task to, I fix the grammar on these, and the time spent on projects, and make sure everybody understands their individual due dates and the overall project due date, right? And then depending on how your business is set up, this information also needs to fill into billing summaries. If you have clients that you're billing as the project progresses, they want to know why they're paying the bill. So this project management also turns into assistance with billing, and we'll get into that a little bit more later when we talk about the budget. But spending that time on setting up your scope and goals also helps you identify gaps and flaws that you may have, which enable smarter project decisions. Okay. And you may, if you've got a client that you're working with, you want to share both the plan, but also any updates or reports with the client so that they feel vested in this. And it makes your project transparent, which turns around and creates trust. And I'd rather have a vendor come to me on a project and say, we miscalculated and we're going to have to push it out 2 weeks because it's taking longer to install the equipment than we thought it was going to, than to have them try and hide it from them. Okay. At any given time, we could have 7 or 8 project management projects going on in our organization. And I always tell people I'd much rather know ahead of time if something has had to change than for me to find out by accident. Okay. So this leads us into developing the project plan. So you know what your scope of work is, you know what you're responsible for. The project plan is the guiding force for your team. Okay. You want to make sure everybody understands your expectations, what resources are available, the project budget, and when you have to have final delivery to the client. And resources available is key because sometimes your budget for a project might be larger than other times. And your team needs to understand, is this we are doing this with the best possible equipment that's reasonably priced, or is this client want the high-end equipment and is willing to put the money in for the resources? So understanding that helps you provide what the client wants. You want to have a SMART plan that defines all of your tasks, subtasks, and timelines. There is absolutely nothing wrong with a project plan having a visual timeline attached to it. Some teams learn better or comprehend better that way. And you want to make sure that all of the tasks are allocated to your team members. Determine who is responsible for what. So even if 2 people may be working on it, who is ultimately responsible for making sure it gets submitted or it gets completed? That way there's no, well, I thought I had to do it, but really it's Kareem who had to do it, but I didn't know who was going to turn it in, so then neither one of us did it. Okay. You want to make sure that everybody understands who is responsible for what. And you want to estimate the total time and expenses for your project. So for a lot of small businesses, before you even get to project management, you would have put given the client a cost. I can do this project for X, okay? Now you need to make sure that the time that you're going to spend and the expenses that you have fall into that budget, okay? A project plan gives your team the clarity around all aspects of the project. So if they understand what not only their small role is, but how their role fits into the big picture, it helps them to actually get the project done faster because they know why they're doing it and what has to happen in what order for this to be successful. And I know some of this is a little vague, but part of it's because it can be, a project management could be anything from installing equipment in the buses to an interior design for a client who wants you to redo their offices to how do I produce or build a dance studio and a project build out and get what I need. So it's the specifics run the gamut. Anything can be handled through project management. So we're just hitting on the big concepts here. And then you would have to figure out how these apply to the specific project you're attempting to tackle. But the more clarity that you have in this project plan, the better accountability you have, okay? Crystal clear. Do not assume that anybody knows anything, really. Keep it simple and make sure that everybody understands every step of the process. It's much better to spend the extra hour making sure everybody understands at the beginning than 4 days at the end fixing something that could have been handled if everybody understood what was going on. Miscommunication and misunderstanding lead to poor quality and delayed deliverables, okay? If you realize you can't complete a task by its due date, you have to tell them right away that there's a project delay, right? That's not something you try and fix on your own if you're in part of a project management team. Then once you break them all out, consolidate them so that it's not quite so overwhelming. There are systems out there, and at the end, I will hit on the top 3 systems that can be used, and you can add users and create teams and clearly define their responsibilities inside of a program. Now, the third thing is to deliver projects within budget, okay? If I give you $100,000 to design and redo the interior of our offices, that's the budget. You don't get to come back and go, oh yeah, we really just need $150,000, okay? So you need to plan and organize and prioritize to deliver on time and on budget, even with limited resources. You need to confront challenges when it comes to managing projects, both on the budget and the team. And I would say proactively plan, allocate tasks, and track who is working on what. Okay. You also want to monitor the number of hours the staff is spending on this project. Okay. Because you need to know that when you do the debrief, if you've overestimated or underestimated the staff time, and also you're paying your staff to do this work. And you sometimes have to reallocate resources to a different project. But tracking the time and resource invested in the project will help you stay on budget and deliver it as promised. Now, I will say, especially for anybody who's looking to do construction projects, large projects, a lot of times there is language in the contract that you will sign with the client about failure to meet the goal or the date of the contract could result in monetary penalty. Okay, so you want to be very careful about understanding that. You know, if you do not complete this project and have the finished project to me by the date specified in the contract, you will incur a penalty of $1,000 a day, right? Or $100 a day, depending on the project. So you want to make sure there's a reason why, you know, delivering projects within budget and on time is so critical. So as part of that on budget, you need to make sure that you're tracking all of the expenses, okay? You can't afford to ignore a single project expense because in a small business, somebody has to pay for that, right? It has to be allocated somewhere. Every single thing that we buy in our organization has to be tracked to a project or a budget line, okay? So tracking all expenses, because if the client, depending on what the project is, you may have to submit an itemized bill for materials. You may have to bill back for hours, depending on if they're paying you by the hour instead of a flat fee. So tracking all those expenses is critical. And calculating estimated costs and additional expenses. So even though you know what you've spent to date, but you also always have to have in your head the number of what's still coming. Okay, so we still have $50,000 worth of stuff that can hit this project. And do we still have enough room in the budget for that? Make sure you're identifying discrepancies. If you have to generate invoices, make sure you have whatever backup the client is requiring. Share everything, okay? And these days we don't mail anything, we share it with a click, right? We email PDFs of everything. Everything to do with a specific project should have a specific home. I like to set up folders in a shared drive for everything to do with every project. So at any given time, even if it's a project I'm not working on, I can go into the central folder. I can go up to the central cloud, find the folder for the project I'm interested in, see what's going on with it, see the timeline, see the expenses, see invoices, what have we paid already. Everything should be in there. And it allows for tracking on money invested in the project, okay? So this is an example of payments that have gone out and whether or not they're paid. So part of project management is tracking that if you are billing for work, that you get paid for it. Hopefully you all have somebody who has a lot of financial acumen who can help you with this, but you want to, not only is it important to be able to do the work, but it's also important to be able to track the expenses. All right, the next is talking about your project teams. So a highly functioning team will work together and work in sync, okay? They become seamless. They know they can anticipate what's going on and work together, so you almost don't know where one team member ends and the next begins. You need them to be focused on the project goal and work collaboratively or collectively to achieve them. They need to be able to communicate and collaborate. I think one of the things that came out of the pandemic was we did learn that you don't necessarily have to be in the office next to each other to communicate and collaborate, but you need that at some avenue, right? I had never used Teams before we went into the pandemic, and now we use it for everything. And it allows me to talk to my staff and collaborate and work with them. So we talk about communication and collaboration, and traditionally we think of that as in a room together or in the same building. But these days, as long as you have some sort of mechanism for the teams to be able to talk to each other, that should still be able to be maintained, even if the teams are spread out across the country. Okay. You need to make sure you have some sort of file sharing, and a way to talk about potential problems, right? Those tasks that can bottleneck everything. All right. We needed a different set of screws to install the system in our buses. And we had to figure out who could go and get them so that we didn't have to wait and stop doing the project. So was there somebody else who could run out and if we ordered these screws, go pick them up? Okay. So communication allows you to address that easily. And a team, a project team that really feels like they're all working together will give their best to the project because they all, again, feel vested in it. So collaboration leads to higher efficiency, greater innovation, improves problem solving, and your overall project success, right? If you can use the same teams for similar projects and keep the team together, that helps build team cohesion. When I came on board, I set up my staff. I set up departments as teams. So we have team operations, team finance, team infrastructure, and team brokerage. And they're all different colors on the chart, and they all deal with their projects within their teams. So I gave them an identity, which helps keep them motivated. So you need to keep team members on the same page. Don't allow somebody to be disconnected or working in a silo, okay? We all know that person who's not a team player. That can really hurt you when you're talking about project management, okay? They need to be able to communicate when there's changes, updates, or developments. And you need to stay on the same page for every stage of the project. So the ability to initiate conversations and give suggestions really does help. This is the one thing I think that we do miss out by not all being in the office together, is those conversations, that the old water cooler chats that we all used to have, or the kitchen chats where we'd be chit-chatting about something else, but a project would come up and you'd say, oh, you know, I'm trying to work through this. Oh, well, I did that last week, and try this. Okay. So because if we don't have that, we need to make sure that we create an atmosphere where that can still happen. So we want to make sure that we're measuring and acknowledging team productivity, which will then prevent failure. Okay. You may have 2 or 3 teams who are all working on multiple projects, right? You may, depending on how busy you are, you know, with a small staff, you may be juggling multiple things going on. All of your projects are equally important. They just may not all be equally important at the same time, okay? And that's the difference, the art versus the science. All of the projects are equally important. How do I kind of move A over B and then B back to, over A, and then where does C fit in? And it's that constant movement. Projects, a lot of projects run as expected. Others might not be able to stay on schedule. So when something gets put aside or put on hold because of a roadblock, what are they switching to work on? Because you can't just sit and not do anything. How do you identify the roadblocks that come up, right? As a manager, you want to make sure that you're paying attention to what's going on throughout this process and that the project is still moving on. Okay. Are the teams making the required effort, investing the time and working diligently towards the assigned tasks? If the team is doing everything they're supposed to do and it's outside forces that are holding them up, that's fine. What you don't want to do is find out that one team member is causing the team to fall behind because they're not doing their part of the project, right? We talk about time on task. You want to make sure you're monitoring what each team member is working on. We use tracking sheets. So if they're working on 2 or 3 projects throughout the day, they will just note down, I spent, 2 hours on the Equans project. I spent 3 hours working on the spare project. And then I went back and spent 2 more hours working on Equans. Okay, then I can look at their tracking sheets and see how much time on task they're spending, how much of each of these projects is taking up their day. The more efficient and productive your project members are, the better your output will be. So monitoring that performance, keeping an eye on that, tracking time, identifying what pace, identifying the roadblocks, make smarter decisions, okay, that will boost the team's productivity. Make sure that if they're creating project reports that they are helpful. They were supposed to say of tremendous use. My use dropped off apparently. And you may have to do presentations, which can actually, if you have a good project management plan, that will help you write the reports and the analysis of the project activities, okay? You should be able to, at the end of a project, based on analysis, present a summary of all the task due dates and financials, and that they were met on time and what they cost the organization in hours or in hard dollars, okay? So the key to any project management plan is to move from inception to completion. All right, you have to move through the phases. You can't get stuck. But don't let the process become cumbersome. You don't want the process to hold you up. You want the process to help you move along. So you need to manage every stage of the project: planning, prioritizing, managing, analyzing, and delivering. Shared calendars can help with this, task visualization, timelines, and they should provide real-time updates, right? So if you're keeping your calendar up to date with what you're working on, that should provide real-time updates to show that you're moving from inception to completion. That move and meeting your project expectations and keeping the client happy. All of that is possible, even with limited resources, if you follow the plan. And then, like we said before, assessing project post-completion. Don't forget that when it's done, pay attention to what you did and what worked and what didn't. Or what worked because of that particular project, but maybe a sticking point in the future. So analyze whether the project progressed according to the plan, assess outcomes, and compare. Did it meet expectations, exceed expectations, or fail to achieve the standard set? Okay. Look back at that total time spent on the project. Look at the original estimate you used to create the budget for the project. Did you hit your numbers? Were you off on your numbers? Were any additional expenses incurred that you hadn't thought of maybe in the initial process that need to be not only accounted for in this project, but taken into consideration for future projects? Right? Verify the time spent on task to make sure that it was on, that it stayed on track, or where it did not stay on track. And use a quality check process, okay? That is how you find gaps or flaws or poor quality work, okay? And then managing users and streamlining work. We talked about clarity and transparency. You want to communicate and manage your users. Right? Nobody should ever say, I didn't know. You want to reduce the blame game, okay? That communication helps keep everybody on the same page and keeps the workflow so that does not become inefficient. When you're looking at assigning roles or who you assign, base it on experience, knowledge, or position within the organization. And in that order, first it should be on experience, and then knowledge, and then your default would be based on their position in the organization, they get the role. But you really want experience and knowledge to be first and foremost, because in theory, the position in the organization should be based also on their experience and knowledge. But sometimes you may have somebody who can be a really key asset to your project, but it's not what they do every day. It just happens to be something they're good at. So look at everybody when you're setting up your team and identify their strengths and weaknesses and delegate tasks accordingly. Understand your team. So what's their work style? What's their focus level? I have found, even from managing projects with my team, that we have 3 different times you can start your day. For the morning people, you can come in at 8 a.m. and work until 4. Then we allow some people to come in at 8:30 and work till 4:30 because they have childcare issues or things that they have to get done in the morning. And then I have a few staff who come in 10 to 6 because they are not morning people. And I don't get anything out of them in the morning. So while it may not be convenient to have them come in at 10 and stay till 6 when everybody else is working 8 to 4, if they're getting all of their work done and it is top-notch work, it is totally worth having them come in a little bit later because that's when they work well. And understanding your team and what they need helps make them a better team. And obviously reward top performers. So if they complete a project on time, reward doesn't necessarily have to be monetary. Maybe you can give them an extra day off. Hey guys, we got this project done and it was on time and on budget. I'm giving everybody Friday off. Okay. Keep your eye on the donut, which is your end goal, and not the hole in the donut. Okay. Those are the hurdles. So any questions on that part of steps to create the plan? We're going to get a little bit into what goes into a plan next. But I'm happy to take any questions that anyone has. All right. So there are 12 factors to consider when you're putting your plan together. We're going to go through each one of these, so I'm not going to read the slide, but it's just to show you this is what we're looking at. So understanding the role. When you put together your plan, you want to create a checklist so that each member knows what their tasks are for their role. So that first question you want to ask is, what's my role in the project? The first thing you should, a good staff member will come up to you and say is, okay, I understand we've got this project starting. What's my role in the project? There has to be a project manager. Somebody has to lead the project. Somebody has to be the one that they go to. That may be you as the owner of the company because it's a small company. But if you have staff who are available, or maybe you're the big thinker in the organization and they're better at the minutia details, play to the strengths, make that minutia detail person your project manager. But then they have to have the ability to make decisions. Okay, so you need to still trust their ability to make decisions. Those actions highlight credibility and keep the team trust throughout the project. So 4 major responsibilities of your project manager would be to lead and manage the team, provide updates to upper management, manage the quality of the deliverables, and have a contingency plan. And we're going to talk about Plan B as part of this. You want to make sure your plan shares the project vision, all right? Clients have expectations when they hire you to do a project, or an organization has an expectation of what is going to happen when a project is done. The team needs to all be on the same page. Right from the very beginning, make sure that they understand the vision for this project, whether it's an internal business project or it is an external project for a client. Okay. And 3 things that can help you to explain the project vision are your project goals and objectives, the availability of resources, and client expectations. Okay. Now, it's also important as an organization that you identify who the stakeholders are throughout the project. Okay. And this is going to change at different points in the project, especially the larger or the more time-consuming the project is. So those stakeholders are anyone who can impact or be impacted by the project. And you want to understand who those stakeholders are. They could include the client, the project manager, higher management, team members, vendors, or leaders in other departments. Okay, but a proactive approach to your stakeholders helps to handle changes and requests and other challenges during the project. Okay. In our organization, the chief financial officer does not generally get involved in project management, although he is updating his system, so that's his project. But as our CFO, he needs to be aware of the projects. He's a stakeholder in our projects, because if we have a change in funding request or we need to change the timing on the funding, he is the one who needs to make that happen. So while he's not considered a member of the project management team for most of my projects, he is a stakeholder in those projects. Even our receptionist can be a stakeholder in some of our projects if they're going to directly impact our clients, right? The customers who are on the bus. So understand that the stakeholders are bigger than just who's on your team. Now, in the project management world, we use acronyms, and WBS is one of them. WBS is work breakdown structure. And a work breakdown structure helps you to set clear goals. So this is one of the things as you're building your goals you want to keep in mind. So all projects contain what we can call trivial tasks, right? They have to be done, but they're not complicated. They're check the box to say you did it tasks, and then complicated tasks. And you need to make sure that all of those tasks are in the project requirement checklist, and that they're organized in a way that will ensure that you deliver your project on time with quality and budget. Okay, so work breakdown structure helps you do that. Specifically, that complicated tasks are divided into small parts for delegation and execution. Okay, so let's take an example. We need to rewrite the organization's bylaws. Okay, well, our bylaws are 20 pages long. So the way to approach that is to take each section of the bylaws and assign a person to look at each section. And then that allows you to give people manageable tasks to do in a tighter deadline and hold them accountable. By breaking down the work structure, you also get better resource utilization because you're clearly identifying what resources you need to use when. And it will also help you with scope creep. Okay, because one of the things that'll happen is you'll start doing the project. Like we're going to install passenger counters in every single one of our buses. Okay, so we have 75 buses, every single one's going to get a counter. And then the counter is going to allow us to tell people where the bus is. So now we can have live feed in our terminals that will tell you when our buses are coming. Okay, but that's not the original scope of the project. So let's pull it back, and that can be a different scope. That can be another project, but this project right now is to get the passenger counters installed in all the buses. Okay. If you have clear goals, you will not encounter scope creep or project derailment. So work breakdown structure will give you better quality and on-time project delivery. Another thing that you need to make sure you do is create that ideal budget, okay? And this is, again, a work breakdown structure that breaks down every minute little step, helps you identify truly how much time or what resources you are going to need to put into this, okay? So the budget is one of your main priorities for project planning because it's really what drives the project, okay? If you don't have the money to do a project, you can't do it, right? I mean, I'm sure if I asked every single one of you if there's a project you would love to do, all of you could name a project for me. It's when I turn around and say, but how would you fund it? That we sometimes hit the roadblock, right? I would personally like to have an entire fleet of electric buses, but at $1 million each and a 2.5-year backlog on getting them, it's not a reality that I can have that. So make sure you have the money for the project. And because if you don't have the investment, you could jeopardize deadlines. If you're waiting for money to come in so that you can buy something so you can move the project forward, you run the risk of delaying the project. So when you're looking at your budget, you want to take these 3 factors into account. You want to check the project requirements against available resources. You want to evaluate how short or how long a time window you have, but mostly they're short. And then use historical data to find common budget loopholes. So if you've done something similar in the past, what tripped you up the last time? Other thing that we all forget about, unless you're writing a grant where this comes in, is determining direct and indirect costs, okay? It's very easy for us to say, all right, this project for installing the equipment on the bus, I have to buy the equipment, I have to buy the software licenses, and I have to figure out the labor costs. What it doesn't involve right away is now the expense to maintain the equipment, the overhead for the garage that the equipment is stored in, and any administrative expenses that we have. So if you own a business, no matter how small it is, you should have a handle on what your indirect costs are, so that you understand when you're building out a proposal to a client for how much you're gonna charge them for something, those indirect costs are taken into effect. And then when you're doing a project, you wanna also allocate them in so that you have a true sense of the total cost of the project, even if you don't end up billing the client, right? Even if you have to pay rent, you figure I'm gonna pay rent anyway, so I'm not gonna bill it back to the client. But you should know how much it costs you to use that portion of the building for the time you're doing the project. And we will, for those who are coming back for session 4, where we spend time on the budget, we will spend time on direct and indirect costs. Now, another one of our acronyms is RACI. The RACI matrix says who is responsible, who is accountable, who is consulted, and who should be informed for each task. Okay, so you should have an answer for all parts of the project management plan. Who is responsible, who is accountable, who is consulted, and who should be informed. Okay. In our case, I am generally not responsible or accountable. I may or may not be consulted depending on the scope of the project, but I should always be informed. Okay, and that's kind of the rule of thumb we use in our organization. The ability to answer the questions in this matrix help you gain better clarity, help you delegate tasks efficiently, and keep the project on track until completion. Okay, these address a lot of the blame, finger pointing, I didn't know that was my job questions. Now, we always need a plan B. Okay, no matter how good your project management plan is, in the back of your mind, at a bare minimum, you need to have a plan B. Okay. When you encounter unexpected problems and start to lose control, if you need to bring in extra resources, right? If you have to revise deadlines, or you can't revise deadlines. So if you cannot change the due date for a project, plan B might be, I need to stop working on project 1, 2, 3 and put that team on this project until it's back on track. Okay, and you shift priority for the most important and time-sensitive tasks. So your plan B is your backup plan. It's your contingency plan. In some ways, a good project manager will have it jotted down somewhere, where there's a couple of times you'll see if as we assess the plan, if we've gone off the rails, this areas where we can jump in. Other times, it's just in their head, but you should always be thinking that if something changes, how am I going to address it? Okay. Change requests, especially on a big project with an outside client, right? That you're doing work for a client. It is not uncommon or unreasonable to expect that there may be changes that are requested. You're moving along and you see this a lot. The big one I use it for is construction, right? We were building a new building, we're building a maintenance facility, and all of a sudden we realized we wanted an extra office in the open space. We felt that a partial office would be beneficial. It wasn't on the original plans, but we're going to change and add that. Okay. So how are you going to manage changes that come in? Who's going to take the request for change? how are they gonna add that into the project the management plan? Who are they gonna then assign to it? So change requests should also have their own kind of to-do list. If a change comes in, you know, Mary's gonna handle it and she'll make sure that Michael fits it into the plan, and this is how we're gonna move forward. When a request comes in, as much as we all know the client is always right and our answer should always be yes, before you say yes, make sure that you understand the impact and that you can articulate that to the client. We can make this change, but it's going to add a week to the project timeline because this is outside of what we were planning on doing. Okay. If the client comes in with the change request, they're probably going to understand that it's going to have a time change and potentially a monetary change. Okay. The important thing is that everybody's on the same page when these requests for change come in, and you have a mechanism within the project management plan to absorb those changes. So one scenario that you can use to handle these requests is make sure the team understands the priority of a change request that comes in. Divide them up uniformly across your team, if possible, so that one person doesn't feel overburdened by everything. And my personal favorite is sometimes you just need to make fun activities. If the project has had a lot of changes that come in and the team is getting frustrated, maybe it's time to do an ice cream break in the middle of the day and go, hey, you know what? We've gotten a bunch of changes on this. Everybody is feeling frazzled with this project. We're going to do ice cream sundaes at lunch and have a little bit of fun. And then we can circle back, and then they feel like there's value, even though the project they thought they were working on has changed a little bit. In your project management plan, you want to make sure that you set an ideal frequency of communication. How often are we going to communicate? Communication is key. Okay? It is fundamental to your success. It is also the best way to prevent chaos. When we were young, we all played the game telephone, right? We leaned over, we whispered something to the person next to us, and by the time it made it around the room, it was so far from the first sentence that was done that it was funny. That game of telephone is not funny when it involves your workplace and a project that you're trying to manage. So by clearly communicating on whatever frequency works for your team, if that's daily meetings, weekly meetings, however it is, it's a way to provide input for matters that will make the project go smoothly. But you have to be careful not to over communicate, because over communication can also turn into feeling like micromanagement. Like you don't trust us to do anything, so you're checking in and communicating with us every day. So that ideal frequency for the team and the project is key to the momentum and success. So one that we use in our office is we hold stand-up meetings on Mondays for a quick discussion. And a stand-up meeting is one where you literally stay standing. So these are 5 to 10 minute meetings, right? Nobody gets in a chair and gets comfortable. We come in, we make sure everybody knows what their tasks for the week are on that project. And then Friday, a status report goes out via email. Okay. And at the stand-up meetings, if I've got team members who are remote, we will bring them in on Zoom. Okay. But this works for the majority of the projects that we have going on, but not all of them. I have a major construction project going on that has a different frequency of communication. So finding out what works for your team, and you may have a few missteps at the beginning, but the key is that balance between communicating so everybody feels like they're heard and understand, and not over communicating to make the team feel like you don't trust them. So risk mitigation. Okay, so there's risks in every project that we do. Okay. It may be a high level of risk, or it may be a low level of risk. It's, can you manage the risks that you find? Because unidentified risks could lead to unacceptable deliverables. Right. When you're making your project management checklist, you should think about what risk might come up. Okay. One of the very first projects that I project managed was the building of the terminal in Fall River, the bus terminal in Fall River. And we were on site, we were doing demolition, we were working through it. All of a sudden I get a call, we shut down all work on the site because they found a fuel tank that none of us knew was on property. And it was not on any plans. Nobody knew if it was full or not full. And we literally had to shut down the project so we could get the fire department there, have them do a side scan, see if it was full or empty, and then have it removed. Okay. There was no scenario in my head where we had thought that there would be an empty tank that wasn't accounted for, because we had already accounted for a tank on the property. Okay, so I learned a very valuable lesson with that project to expect the unexpected, assume the worst, prepare for the worst, and then you won't get caught off guard. Okay, the more you can address any risk at the beginning, the better the chances of recovery from any risk that comes up. So ways to prepare for risk mitigation is to monitor closure reports of prior projects, see if you found any risk factors there. Go through your project requirements in your contract with a fine-tooth comb, preferably with your lawyer. And solicit input from experienced and top performing executives while developing risk mitigation strategies. So if you've taken on a project that you yourself and your company has never done before, find some friends in the industry who can talk to you about, hey, I did that, and this is something that we didn't account for. Right? This is something we didn't realize was going to become an issue. And incorporate that into your planning going forward. Now, documentation. This is one where if it's a project for your internal team, you may have a sufficient amount of documentation for your own internal organization. If you are doing this for a client, documentation becomes key because you have to report back to them. Okay. So you want to make sure that you give proper attention to the documentation process. It's also a teaching tool for you, right? You will learn something from every project. I can tell you over the years with the variety of projects that we've managed, I've learned a lot of lessons, right? It's, I'd like to say that they all go great, but you always have some sort of bumps in the road. The key is how you address those bumps. And if you can learn from your mistakes, you can prevent them in the future. You want to capitalize on good strategies and streamline trouble-causing factors, right? And at the end of your project, make sure that you go over all of the documentation and make sure that you have everything you need to close out a project. Okay. This also becomes key if you're doing this project with grant funding. Chances are you're going to have to turn in documentation at the end of the grant to prove that you did what you said you were going to do. So all of this documentation comes back to helping you make sure that you hit your project management goals. So as you're closing out your project, you want to discuss ups and downs with the team. You want to keep it positive, right? You don't want this to turn into a negative, this was the worst experience ever. But you do want them to feel comfortable saying what worked and also what didn't. If people were top performing on the project, your top project executives, make sure you give them credit. Okay. Anytime you give your team credit, other people in your organization hear about it. Right. And you want to archive the final documents somewhere in your company's database for future use. And or if you ever get audited, you want to be able to pull out that information. So make sure you archive and save everything on a project for whatever. I mean, I save project notes even past the financial deadlines of having to keep things if I think we'll do a project again. So when we talk about project management, right, there's the initiation, then there's the planning, then there's executing, and then there's controlling, and then there's back to executing and controlling, and those two can go back and forth, and then you finally have closure. All right, so I like a nice little visual every once in a while to keep everyone's attention. Now, from the client perspective, when you are doing project management for a client, these are the steps you want to make sure that you follow with the client, okay? So the first is the contract. You want to have a contract to do this work, all right? That's a legal protection to make sure you get paid and that you and the client have a mutual understanding of who is responsible for what when. What comes out of that what you also need for that contract is a statement of work or a SAL. And your statement of work is exactly what you as the company are going to produce for the client. All right. It's the agreed upon requirements. It should be simple. It should be to the point. It does not have to be a lengthy document. If you can use the owner's own description of what they're looking for, that's perfect. Put that right in there. And the better you outline it, the easier it will be to get consensus. What you want to do is say, for your payment, we are going to produce X, Y, and Z for you. Okay. So like the contract, the statement of work is between you and the client. The contract is the legal document that will ensure that you get paid, and it will reference the scope of work. So they work hand in hand. But you want to make sure you have these two documents set before you start anything. So your scope of work should have an overview of the project objectives, a work breakdown, okay, accountability, and project schedule. So a brief description of the project, then define your objectives, then list the activities, then determine accountability and put that timeline in there. Along in the scope of work, you would also have milestones and due dates. All right. You may only have 1 or 2 milestones, or you may have 10 milestones. You may have 100 milestones. It depends on how complex the project is. Okay. But you want to assign due dates. You want to review the milestones and revise dates if you need to. you want to, time the delivery to when it's appropriate. These are milestones are not tasks. Milestones are points in which you and the client have agreed that you're going to recognize. A lot of times it's for payment or it's percent complete, right? So that's your basic scope of work and milestones. The next thing you want to make sure that you understand is how are you invoicing the client, okay? You want to get paid for your work, okay? And this can be as simple as a plain white piece of paper with the information on it, or you can, as most of you are artists, be very colorful and fancy with graphics and all kinds of fanciness. I am not an artist and I am graphically challenged. So mine tend to have our company logo and our plain white paper, right? If you are using QuickBooks or something else, something similar to that to run your company, they have the ability to customize invoices. And that incorporates it with your bookkeeping. Again, your bookkeeper should, or your CFO or whoever does your finances should be a stakeholder in this, and they can help you make sure this is set up. If you get this set up and you understand when you're going to invoice, it then removes the amount of time you need to deal with that later on down the road. So you're doing monthly invoices, you're doing quarterly invoices, you're doing milestone invoices, whatever the set in the contract and scope of work agreement is, the invoices come next. At a bare minimum, you want to have a note on the invoice terms, the start and end dates, and both signatures, okay? Next, you want to lay out for the client the project plan. So all the things that we've talked about in tonight and all the various areas that we need to include. You want to make sure that that is clearly laid out as a not only an internal document that you're using for the team, but also something you can give to the client. These are not milestones. This is the actual plan on how you're going to get the work done. So you can have high-level milestones down to a detailed and complicated or list. Okay. Remember what the customer's focus is. So if this is a customer document, make sure that they feel like their primary focus is still being accomplished. You want to utilize activities that reference a point of arrival for the owner. So when are they going to get whatever they're asking for, or when are they going to expect to see results? Those milestones allow to build suitable timeframes and provide progress reports. You may, if it's a complicated project plan for the work for your staff, you may choose to simplify and do a high-level one for the client and keep the more detailed project plan as the roadmap for the team. At the end of the day, the project plan is your focus, not theirs, but you can create a lot of trust by showing a client that you have a plan to accomplish the scope of work. You also want to make sure that you all understand the schedule, okay? The time scope and cost of the project management, and the milestones. So when you put them in the scope of work, make sure you also review them with the client so that it is perfectly clear that this project is going to take 6 months. Okay? You are not going to see any visible results until month 3. So If they understand that, then in month 2, they're not gonna continue to hound you and go, why haven't I seen anything yet? Okay. So even when you write in the milestones in the scope of work, make sure your client sees them and actually understands them. Deliverables. So within the milestones, there are going to be actual deliverables that you will be responsible for. And this is going to differ from project to project, right? If you are being tasked with creating a sculpture for an outdoor garden, the deliverable is the sculpture. If you are doing interior design for someone's residence, the deliverables may be, sketches followed by color swatch, followed by ordering the furniture, followed by painting and completion, okay? So make sure that the client not only understands the milestones, but understands the deliverables and when they are going to start. And then at the end, you always want to have an opportunity for client feedback. Sometimes it's not going to be great, right? There are issues that may come up on the project or whatever, but even if there were some bumps in the road, you still want to get feedback from that client, just like this was a perfect project, because you're going to learn from that. And it's your opportunity to thank the client for choosing you, and maybe even acknowledge, hey, I know we hit some bumps in the road, but I really appreciate you sticking with us. And I think we still delivered a product that you were happy with. Okay. But it's good to give them an opportunity to tell you if there's something they think you could have done differently, because it will help you improve your service. So it's not always going to be the easiest thing you'll do, but getting that client feedback is an important part of this process. Now, when we're creating the project plan, sometimes I will approach this as a team project, because team members may be able to help you focus on different things, and they have different expertise, but they will help you pull together the task list, duration, and the start and end dates. When you write a project plan, you're probably not going to nail it all on the first pass. All right. As great as we all are, there are things that once we do the first draft and we put it aside for a little bit and we go back and look at it, there are things that our brain has picked up that we miss. Okay. Sometimes it's the predecessor or successor events that we've forgotten. Like, we know we need to install the computers, but where did we actually buy the computers? Okay. When did we pick the paint color for the redo of the office? And sometimes you need that third pass to really help you identify the milestones and look at it with the eyes of, where are my risks or exceptions, right? There is nothing wrong with multiple passes on a project plan. This is not something that you need to nail on the first pass. It's better to spend the time and get it right than just get it done because you had to get it done. Want to check if you have very tight time constraints and financial resources. The tighter the budget is on something, or the more quickly you need to get it done, the more critical the project plan becomes, because you don't have wiggle room. Okay. If you can't afford to have delays, you can't afford to have mistakes when you have tight time constraints or fiscal resources. All right. If you can possibly outline at the most granular level during the first draft, it'll help you to only have to be minor changes on your second pass, but sometimes it's just not possible, so do what works best for your team. And you may do the same project a lot of times. right? And so maybe you have a standard template that as a team, you kind of sit down and go, okay, we know these are all the things we need to do. So for this particular client, let's plug in the details on a standard template. Now, project management software. These days, computers are a wonderful thing, and technology has certainly come a long way in helping us track things. They're not going to replace the people actually doing the work, but they will help you with the accountability and communications. So what project management softwares can help you do is task prioritization, right? What are those critical tasks so your team has a clear idea of what needs to be done first? They allow for task comments, okay? So, you know, you as the project manager may take a look down and go, oh, this task is going to need more time, so they may want to start early. So you may be able to put a comment in going, you can start this task earlier than is on the schedule, okay? And a lot of times these softwares have a calendar function. So you can actually print out the tasks that you have to do broken out day by day. So it's almost like a task plan for your day. For this project, I need to get these things done every day to keep this going. If you're doing multiple projects, you may have multiple lists that you're working off of every day. So project management software can help with that as well. So based on what we use and also talking to several other people who use software, these are the top three, okay? Monday.com is the one we use in our office. It allows a shared team calendar. So even if it's just myself and my admin, we use it for just stuff that she and I are working on because it helps keep us on track. And you can schedule out tasks weeks or even months in advance to make sure you're hitting milestones. Some of our projects are very long term. So we found that this one is the best for our organization. Trello is something I've used in the past with other projects. This treats each step as a card and you can converse per task on a card, which makes it really easy for teams working to communicate on specific tasks without bothering the whole team, right? So if Freeman and I are specifically working on the schedule for the dancing school, we could just be going back and forth on the Trello card for that without bothering the people who are making sure the equipment is in place and that the paint color is right. Okay. And it creates an action log that you can go back to. Then the third one is Basecamp, which is, it has a very simple dashboard. It's very user friendly and uses navigation squares. And you can jump back and forth to what you need. So these are the top three based on a whole bunch of Consumer Report things. I haven't used Basecamp. We use Monday.com and I have used Trello. I think in this day and age, some sort of project management software is definitely a way to help you keep the project moving. And they're reasonable enough for the most part that even if for a very small business, they can help you keep track of things. All right, so as we wrap up, before we do questions, project management plans help you be on top of everything, okay? They are a way for you to not let any balls drop because everything is accounted for in there. So they're really a critical business tool for you, right? And they're a way you can grow your company because as you can take on more projects and as you can handle them, you can grow your company. They create the timely deliverables. They allow you to have a productive team, which makes your customers happy. Okay, they set those well-defined project goals and scopes. They track the productivity of your team, the project status. They help you communicate, and they assess completed projects. And a well-developed project management checklist will boost a team's productivity and reduce possibility of errors and unnecessary expenses. So they really are a valuable tool for you to use in the best way possible. So now I am happy to take any questions that come up, and I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen so I can see everyone. So I know I've been talking for a long time. Anybody have any specific questions? Is everybody still awake?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I know I picked on you, Kareem, but that's only because you were in last week's class too, so. Here's what we'll do. I am happy to stay on the line if anyone has any questions. If not, you're welcome to drop off. I know next week is marketing. I don't know who's teaching that. And then for those of you who've signed up for the whole series, I will be doing the budgeting class in 2 weeks. I believe that one's on a Monday because it's Thanksgiving week, if my math is correct. And I will stay on if anybody has any questions. Dawson, do you have a question?
No, I don't. Thank you. Sorry, I was just saying thank you in the chat.
No problem.
Have a great night.
Thank you. You too.